So today, on Famicom Friday, in this episode, I'm going to be playing my favorite video game of all time. Still my favorite game. It's been my favorite game for about probably 15 years or roundabout then when I decided it was my favorite. This is Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo or the Super Famicom. This is the game that would have pioneered the genre that we call Metroidvania. Half of that being Metroid and half of that being Castlevania Symphony of the Night. But essentially games like Hollow Knight were heavily inspired by this game in particular. This has went on to inspire an entire genre. But Metroid is just really well known for being a perfect combination of combat, exploration, puzzle solving, and even inventing things like the concept of sequence breaking a game. So getting items in the wrong order by sort of abusing the mechanics of the game. I'm just going to play through maybe like the introduction sequence and just possibly just getting to a few items in the game, possibly maybe the first boss, and that should probably do. But this is probably one of my most played games of all time, so I'm definitely quite experienced at this game as well. I've definitely been pretty heavily involved in trying to speedrun this game. I think the fastest I've ever beat this game in is in the high 50s, whereas the world record is something like 26 minutes, which is crazy. But in this case, we've come to a space station where a biological experiment has been found, the Metroid, but it's going to be kidnapped by the general of the space pirates, who are essentially the bad guys in most of the Metroid games. They're responsible for killing the protagonist's parents, attacking their homeworld, and just loosely giving the Metroid franchise a villain and a story. So this is who we call Ridley, who is actually named after the character from Alien the movie, confirmed. According to Nintendo, it just runs away once you get to a certain point. You can shoot it enough that it does fly away without getting your health down below 30. This is probably one of the first, really iconic escape sequences in a game as well. Not only just saying there's a timer, but changing the atmosphere of the station so it's sort of coming apart. So this game definitely worked on the atmosphere. I think you can get out of the station. It's something like 8 or 9 seconds in the world record, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, this game just is so inspiring for people that were into this genre, and it's just so hard to put a finger on just how many games this game would have inspired. I mean, you had Metroid 1 on the Nintendo as well, that I guess was sort of like a precursor to this game, but this is really like the crown jewel in the Metroid franchise, I would say. So at this point, we're gonna just escape the station in time, which is a little silly because I still had about 40 seconds on the clock. But I guess they're just trying to make it a bit more dramatic. So this is a planet Zebes. This is like the main focus of the game. It's also where you spend the first game as well. I won't spoil it, but you don't come back to this planet. I won't say why, but you can probably put 2 and 2 together. We're definitely not going to go all the way through the game, that's for sure. But you'll see sort of some of the aspects of exploration. We have a mini-map. This is one of the first games that really featured the concept of a map to track your progress, so unlocking the map. So the concept of what we call fog of war in video games was probably quite heavily coined in this game. So as you explore the map, more of it opens up, and then you can sort of track where you've been. But yeah, I know this game like the back of my hand. It's just so classic. If you haven't played it before, but you enjoy platformers or sort of side-scrolling shooters, you have to play it. It's so hard to describe just how much fun this game is and just how much intrigue there is in the atmosphere and the puzzle solving. Obviously you can tell I love this game. At the moment that the planet's sort of like deactivated, nothing's awake. Essentially you're meant to think the planet's empty, but as you know in these games, usually it turns out to be a trap. So we're going to go down. This is actually where you finish the first Metroid, so anyone that's played Metroid 1 would have noticed that iconic room where you fight the main boss of Metroid 1 called the Mother Brain. That's sort of harkening back to that room. We're also going to the first room in the original Metroid game. This is where you begin in an area called Brinstar to collect the iconic item in Metroid, the Morph Ball, or the Morphing Ball in this game. They call it Morph Ball later on in the 3D games, but this is a really cool little item that essentially lets you shrink to 1 tile in size and go through tunnels. Again, just an example of the creativity of the items in this game. There's not really any other item, any other game that's sort of, you know, really coined items that really just changed the gameplay so much, just in one simple little thing. We're going to get missiles as well, which let you open different types of doors. So anyone that's played like later Metroid games will probably notice a lot of the music and the sounds are definitely, you know, inspired. Like if you've played the Metroid Prime series, you'll probably notice the item sound was very similar to what they use in Metroid Prime as well. Now, what I did just there, I used a special move. It's called wall jumping. This is one of the first games that actually let wall jumping be a thing. But the game doesn't teach you how to do this. You just figure it out eventually over time. So the game does have like some sort of skills that you don't actually really get taught how to do, but you just discover, and that can sort of open up different aspects of the game that maybe weren't as available to you if you didn't know how to use some of those skills. So there's really interesting little mechanics that they put in the game like that really can change the game quite a lot once you discover them. Now in this case we're going to go back, and in this case it's also going to show the creativity of the design team, that they actually make some of the rooms change depending on what's happened. In this case we're essentially sort of going to wake up the security of the planet, so the space pirates have found us. So immediately we're going to notice the room's a little bit different. It's actually got enemies in it now. But the good thing about that is they're going to drop items for us. So we actually have some missiles to use when we get back up the top. I'll probably go and fight the first boss, and then I'll probably leave it there. This room's not the most exciting room, so in this case I'm probably going to try and abuse my wall jumping a little bit to get up this room faster. See what I mean? That this room would be much more timely and difficult to navigate if I didn't know how to wall jump. And, you know, most people when they first play the game, they don't know. So you sort of like find that on different playthroughs of the game, you actually, you know, experience it differently based on how you actually play the game. So when you know how to wall jump, you can actually skip some items in the game as well. You can do some very interesting, what we call sequence breaks, when you know how to wall jump as well. There's actually some super advanced moves in the game as well that are sort of more like glitches than moves almost. Some of them are like, they're sort of like glitches, but they don't like feel like they're unintentional. But because there was such a complex physics engine in this game for its time, there's actually some really interesting ways you can combine some of the mechanics. For example, if you hit the ground in Morph Ball whilst you're running at just the right time, you actually won't lose momentum when you hit the ground. And that actually literally opens up an early sequence break for one of the items in the game. And people didn't even realize it until they sort of started experimenting with the game and the physics, and it just became like a canonical move that you can do in other games now from the series. So now that I have Morph Ball, I can go down here. So the idea of the game is as you collect more items, you get access to more of the world. And there's a lot of backtracking in this game, so going back once you've got different sort of items, which is good and bad. It means that you're encouraged to sort of re-explore areas, but at the same time it means you do go back through areas you've already been to. So you sort of learn optimal routes to go through the game as well. So you can actually skip this boss if you turn around on just the right pixel. So the speedrunning community knows how to do that. I'm definitely not good enough to do it. Essentially the door shuts on you whilst you're just jumping on it. So this guy's pretty tricky. He does give you a lot of pickups though, which is pretty friendly. But usually once you know how to play the game, it's pretty hard to die on this guy. So just make sure oh, there we go, dropped a couple of missiles. Okay, he's pretty much dead now. There we go. So I'll probably almost leave it there. I'll show you something funny about, you know, where most people get stuck in the game, because most people get stuck in the game around about here. So they sort of don't know where to go next. Now we've just picked up an item called bombs, which means we can explode things. We can break breakable blocks. We can unlock more of the area than what we know right now. Now, I got stuck here for a very long time when I was a kid, when I first played this game, and so did my friend. We used to call each other on the phone and try to solve this game together. You know, it was such a classic experience. Now, it turns out you just have to bomb this wall here. But, you know, that was probably about 2 weeks of playing this game for me. Just trying to look for the next place to go. It looks so obvious in hindsight, But as a kid, you look at games in different ways. So there's a lot of nostalgia in this game for me about just learning how to play video games and how to think critically about puzzle and problem solving and looking at things that look different on a map or different graphically. So absolutely classic game. Highly recommend, my favorite game of all time. And hope you enjoyed today's Famicom Friday, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.